Ricky.
Ada biografinya nggak ya?
Belum
Nggak
sempat.
usah CV berarti Pak ya?
Iya boleh deh, short biografi aja.
Hai Electrizen, tahu nggak kalau di sistem transportasi yang kompleks seperti pesawat atau kereta api butuh pengawas yang mengatur agar tidak terjadi kecelakaan lalu lintas?
Ini senior manager berarti ya?
Iya betul.
Betul Mbak.
Ya, senior manager perencanaan.
Oke.
Mohon Pak, nanti untuk nama Pak Ricky jelas dan sebutan jabatannya mohon diinfokan lewat chat ataupun lewat WA, nanti biar kita edit di lower third-nya Pak dari operator.
Yang mengatur agar tidak terjadi kecelakaan lalu lintas dan jalur transportasi bisa terjaga dengan tertib. Nah, di PLN juga ada loh petugas yang bekerja 24 jam sehari, 7 hari seminggu, 365 hari dalam setahun. Bekerja secara shift melakukan tugas serupa. Listrik yang sampai ke rumah kalian diatur dengan memperhatikan 3 faktor.
Pak, ini ada Luis, ini pemateri ya Pak ya? Ini kita admit ya Pak?
Ya, betul.
Dari pembangkit, listrik dialirkan melalui SUTT atau SUTET, saluran udara tegangan tinggi atau saluran udara tegangan ekstra tinggi, menuju gardu-gardu listrik. Dari sekian banyak pembangkit yang ada, dispatcher memilih pembangkit mana yang produksinya paling murah. Dari gardu listrik akan diatur kembali distribusinya ke rumah atau tempat-tempat yang membutuhkan listrik. Selama masa pandemi, untuk memperkecil resiko terpapar, manajemen PLN menerapkan SOP baru bagi petugas. Jadi, sebelum masuk kawasan karantina dan control room, regu akan diswab, lalu masuk ke ruang isolasi sambil menunggu hasilnya. Setelah terkonfirmasi negatif COVID-19, tim bisa langsung bertugas. Dalam satu periode tugas, satu regu akan tinggal selama 14 hari di ruang karantina di kantor.
Sistem planning ya Pak?
Kalau bicara rindu, saya rasa sih semua pegawai kita ketika memang
Tolong
di dinas
Luis
jauh
dibuat,
dengan keluarga.
ya saya udah bikin
mengalami
speaker
rindu
Luis, tolong
kepada
dibuat
anak,
jadi co-host ya.
Kita di sini bekerja secara profesional,
Siap, Pak.
tentunya kita juga harus meninggalkan tanggung jawab kita sebagai sosok ayah ataupun suami di keluarga. Semoga pandemi ini segera berlalu, jadi kita bisa beraktivitas dengan normal, ekonomi masyarakat juga kembali stabil, dan apa yang kita lakukan di sini bisa diterima dengan baik oleh masyarakat. Dengan listrik yang andal, kita bisa menikmati masa new normal dengan nyaman di rumah. Listrik kami jaga dari sini.
Oke Pak. Ya. PLN terbaik.
Dengan berkembangnya teknologi di industri 4.0, menyebabkan kita dapat mengakses berbagai macam hal di dunia digital dengan mudah. Hal tersebut mengakibatkan munculnya format-format dan kebiasaan baru dalam mengakses konten pembelajaran. Di sisi lain, PLN juga menyusun strategi transformasi dengan 4 fokus utama, yaitu Green, Innovative, Customer Focus, dan Lean. Maka dari itu, PLN Corporate University melihat hal ini sebagai tantangan untuk bertransformasi secara digital dalam proses pembelajaran. Untuk menjawab tantangan tersebut, PLN Corporate University meluncurkan produk digital learning untuk memenuhi kebutuhan belajar secara auditory. PLN Corporate University
Pak,
mempersembahkan PLN Corpo Podcast.
Untuk nama Pak Rizky
PLN
dan
Corpo
sebutan
Podcast
jabatannya,
adalah
Pak.
sebuah
Mohon info,
aplikasi
Pak, untuk
streaming
operator,
podcast
kebutuhan operator.
yang dibuat untuk memenuhi kebutuhan belajar secara auditory. Saat ini, PLN
Terima
Corpo
kasih, Pak.
Podcast sudah dapat diunduh dan digunakan dengan memasukkan NIP sebagai username dan tanggal lahir sebagai password. Ada berbagai macam topik podcast yang dibawakan oleh PLNers, mulai dari marketing.
Dengan adanya keterbukaan itu, kebutuhan-kebutuhan mereka tentu saja bisa diungkapkan kepada kita dan sehingga kita bisa menciptakan suatu solusi-solusi produk yang
Manajemen
Itu kita menjual produk. Ya, menjual produk itu kita punya produknya, terus kemudian kita 360 derajat. 30 derajat itu misalnya, ada TV, ada radio.
Millennials,
pendengar juga pengen tahu dong gimana caranya ya buat suara yang enak didengar dan bulat versinya si Hadi. Gitu loh.
Oke, jadi sebetulnya kalau bikin suara bulat semua orang bisa.
dan beragam topik-topik menarik lainnya. Kemudahan dalam mencari topik podcast dapat dengan mudah dilakukan melalui fitur searching berdasarkan narasumber, podcaster, maupun topik tertentu yang ingin didengarkan. PLNers juga dapat menambahkan topik-topik tersebut ke dalam fitur favorite. PLN Korpu Podcast akan terus dikembangkan dalam bentuk tersedianya konten baru setiap bulannya, tersedianya materi untuk semua profesi di PLN, dan tentunya dengan narasumber podcast yang capable di bidangnya. Untuk saat ini, aplikasi mobile PLN Korpu Podcast dapat diunduh di Play Store untuk pengguna Android dan akan segera datang di App Store untuk pengguna iOS. Untuk informasi lebih lanjut, dapat menghubungi pada kontak berikut. PLN Korpu Podcast, the new age of learning. Dengan berkembangnya teknologi di industri 4.0, menyebabkan kita dapat mengakses berbagai macam hal di dunia digital dengan mudah. Hal tersebut mengakibatkan munculnya format-format dan kebiasaan baru dalam mengakses konten pembelajaran. Di sisi lain, PLN juga menyusun strategi transformasi dengan 4 fokus utama, yaitu Green, Innovative, Customer Focus, dan Lean. Maka dari itu, PLN Corporate University melihat hal ini sebagai tantangan untuk bertransformasi secara digital dalam proses pembelajaran. Untuk menjawab tantangan tersebut, PLN Corporate University meluncurkan beberapa produk digital learning untuk memenuhi kebutuhan belajar secara auditory dan visual. PLN Corporate University mempersembahkan LISA atau Learning Solution Assistant. LISA merupakan sebuah aplikasi chatbot pembelajaran berbasis Artificial Intelligence yang dapat diakses setiap saat melalui WhatsApp. Karena menggunakan machine learning, LISA akan semakin pintar seiring dengan banyaknya interaksi antara pengguna dan LISA. Apabila LISA belum mampu menjawab pertanyaan, pengguna akan dihubungkan langsung dengan subject matter expert. Sehingga jika ada pertanyaan yang sama seperti sebelumnya, LISA akan dapat secara langsung menjawab pertanyaan tersebut. Layanan LISA terintegrasi dengan aplikasi WhatsApp dan dapat diakses di nomor berikut. Setelah menyimpan nomor LISA di WhatsApp, PLNers dapat berinteraksi dengan LISA melalui chat WhatsApp. Langkah pertama, ketik sapaan kepada LISA, seperti hai dan halo untuk memulai percakapan. Lalu, LISA akan membimbing PLNers untuk memasukkan nama PLNers. Nama yang dimasukkan akan secara otomatis tersimpan oleh LISA. Setelah itu, LISA akan membimbing PLNers untuk mengakses materi pembelajaran dengan memberikan kode akses sesuai daftar judul pembelajaran, kode pokok pembelajaran atau modul, dan selanjutnya kode sub pokok bahasan. PLNers hanya perlu mengetik kode tersebut untuk dapat mengakses materi-materi yang ada. Setelah selesai mengetik kode-kode tersebut, PLNers akan diberikan akses download materi sesuai yang diinginkan PLNers. Melalui LISA, pengguna juga bisa melakukan self-assessment melalui fitur quiz dan post-test yang tersedia di setiap judul pembelajaran. Selain itu, LISA juga mempunyai fitur Q&A dan FAQ. LISA akan membimbing PLNers untuk mengetik fitur-fitur tersebut jika diperlukan PLNers. LISA akan terus dikembangkan dalam bentuk tersedia materi untuk setiap profesi. Terintegrasi dengan media pembelajaran lainnya baik visual, auditory, maupun kinestetik. Machine learning yang semakin dengan berkembangnya teknologi di industri 4.0 menyebabkan kita dapat mengakses berbagai macam hal di dunia digital dengan mudah. Hal tersebut mengakibatkan munculnya format-format dan kebiasaan baru dalam mengakses konten pembelajaran. Di sisi lain, PLN juga menyusun strategi transformasi dengan 4 fokus utama, yaitu Green, Innovative, Customer Focus, dan Lean. Maka dari itu, PLN Corporate University melihat hal ini sebagai tantangan untuk bertransformasi secara digital dalam proses pembelajaran. Untuk menjawab tantangan tersebut, PLN Corporate University meluncurkan produk digital yang digunakan untuk mengelola leadership development journey dan juga memberikan kemudahan kepada peserta dalam memilih pembelajaran pasca leadership program. PLN Corporate University mempersembahkan Smile, Sistem Monitoring Implementasi Pembelajaran Leadership atau Kepemimpinan. Smile adalah sistem monitoring dan evaluasi berbasis web untuk memonitor journey dari peserta sebelum, saat, dan pasca pembelajaran leadership. Smile juga merupakan platform untuk memelihara soft kompetensi atau future kompetensi untuk para leader dan talent di PLN Group. Aplikasi Smile dapat diakses lebih dari 50.000 anggota dari PLN Group melalui internet di smile.pln-pusdiklat.co.id. Untuk saat ini, Smile dapat diakses menggunakan username dengan nomor induk pegawai atau NIPEG, dan ke depan akan dikembangkan menggunakan account corporate atau melalui single login IMPLN. Aplikasi Smile mempunyai beberapa fitur, yaitu satu account untuk semua role, antara lain peserta, mentor, penguji, manajemen, dan pembimbing. Work plan dan action plan, atau mentoring dan coaching. Telah terhubung dengan aplikasi yang lain untuk menampilkan hasil asesmen peserta pembelajaran leadership, khususnya level manajemen atas dan manajemen menengah. Peserta dapat memilih pengembangan soft kompetensi yang disesuaikan dengan kebutuhannya berdasarkan rekomendasi dari hasil asesmen. Monitoring dan reporting. Pelaksanaan program dapat dengan mudah dimonitor dan menghasilkan laporan data pelaksanaan untuk manajemen dengan data yang real-time. Project Library. kumpulan data program atau proyek yang sudah dilaksanakan. Katalog pembelajaran pasca leadership program untuk memelihara soft kompetensi yang dapat dipilih sesuai kebutuhan masing-masing leaders. Smile akan terus dikembangkan dalam bentuk Divisi Talent Development dan SDM Unit dapat mengusulkan dan tracking peserta secara live. Peserta dapat memilih modul pembelajaran yang semakin beragam, baik secara virtual classroom maupun self-paced learning yang direkomendasikan oleh machine learning. Untuk informasi lebih lanjut, dapat menghubungi pada kontak berikut. PLN Corpus Smile, the new age of learning.
Hai Elektrizen, tahu nggak kalau di sistem transportasi yang kompleks seperti pesawat atau kereta api, butuh pengawas yang mengatur agar tidak terjadi kecelakaan lalu lintas dan jalur transportasi bisa terjaga dengan tertib. Nah, di PLN juga ada loh petugas yang bekerja 24 jam sehari, 7 hari seminggu, 365 hari dalam setahun, bekerja secara shift melakukan tugas serupa. Listrik yang sampai ke rumah kalian diatur dengan memperhatikan 3 faktor, yaitu ekonomis, berkualitas, dan andal. Dari pembangkit, listrik dialirkan melalui SUTT atau SUTET, saluran udara tegangan tinggi atau saluran udara tegangan ekstra tinggi, menuju gardu-gardu listrik. Dari sekian banyak pembangkit yang ada, dispatcher memilih pembangkit mana yang produksinya paling murah. Dari gardu listrik akan diatur kembali distribusinya ke rumah atau tempat-tempat yang membutuhkan listrik. Selama masa pandemi, untuk memperkecil resiko terpapar, manajemen PLN menerapkan SOP baru bagi petugas. Jadi, sebelum masuk kawasan karantina dan control room, regu akan disuap. Lalu masuk ke ruang isolasi sambil menunggu hasilnya. Setelah terkonfirmasi negatif COVID-19, tim bisa langsung bertugas. Dalam satu periode tugas, satu regu akan tinggal selama 14 hari di ruang karantina di kantor.
Kalau bicara rindu, saya rasa sih semua pegawai kita ketika memang dia dinas jauh dengan keluarga akan mengalami rindu terhadap anak, keluarga. Kita di sini bekerja secara profesional, tentunya kita juga harus meninggalkan tanggung jawab kita sebagai sosok ayah ataupun suami di keluarga. Semoga pandemi ini segera berlalu, jadi kita bisa beraktivitas dengan normal, ekonomi masyarakat juga kembali stabil, dan apa yang kita lakukan di sini bisa diterima dengan baik oleh masyarakat. Dengan listrik yang andal, kita bisa menikmati masa new normal dengan nyaman.
member and representative of Austrian Institute of Technology, Mr. Roland Brutlinger. Hello, Mr. Roland. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Distinguished EVP and General Manager. Distinguished guests also to the rest of this webinar participant and all PLN official who are also watching this event through Zoom meetings or YouTube channel. Once again, good afternoon and welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start the Power System series, please allow me to announce you the rule of this event. The first, please set your identity.
Sampaikan beberapa hal. Yang pertama adalah jangan lupa mengganti format nama menjadi nama perusahaan, lalu nama dan juga jabatan.
And turn off the audio while attending the webinar. The third, don't forget to apply the virtual background that we have shared in chat box. For Q&A, please mention your question based on format, name/unit or company/the question. And last is to set your Zoom application in speaker.
Kemudian, silahkan juga menggunakan.
The webinar also facilitated with a language interpreter from Global Bahasa. There will be a detailed explanation provided in the chat box. Okay, before we start our agenda, let's pray together. Pray begin. Finish. To ignite our spirit, let's do the yells together. Bapak Ibu, untuk menyemarakan suasana di siang hari ini, sebelum kita memulai webinar, mari kita yell terlebih dahulu. Semangat pagi. Pagi. PLN, berakhlak, andal, terbaik. Baik, terima kasih atas antusiasme dan semangatnya. Ladies and gentlemen, regarding to the rise and development of decentralized power distribution, utilities have embraced this challenge and opportunity with a pile of innovation and research, also investing in millions budget of large-scale projects. VRE integration as one of significant enabler has rapidly developed in recent years and also have impact in grid code adaptation. So some lesson has been gained from pilot projects and project implementation. Therefore, in accordance with the title of our event today, we will learn and discuss all about the grid code adaptation toward VRE integration, especially experience in reviewing existing grid code, law enforcement aspect, and last but not least is research institute perspective. But before we proceed to the next agenda, please take a look of this company profile video.
Indonesia, sebuah negara kepulauan yang memiliki banyak kota besar dengan peningkatan ekonomi yang pesat. Listrik merupakan penggerak ekonomi. Untuk itu, PLN hadir dengan peranan penting dalam menyediakan tenaga listrik bagi masyarakat. Kami, PLN Unit Induk Penyaluran dan Pusat Pengatur Beban Sumatera, disingkat PLN UI P3B Sumatera, hadir sejak tahun 2004 dalam rangka meningkatkan efektivitas dan keandalan sistem tenaga listrik. Perekonomian di Sumatera berkembang sangat pesat. Dengan berbagai limpahan sumber daya yang dimiliki, memberikan potensi energi yang sangat besar untuk dikelola. Kami hadir dalam menyalurkan tenaga listrik dari sumber energi tersebut melalui jaringan transmisi, sehingga bisa diterima oleh industri besar maupun kecil, serta rumah tangga, sosial, dan umum di berbagai daerah dan provinsi. Saat ini, kami memiliki panjang transmisi lebih dari 16.000 km sirkuit. Jumlah tower mencapai lebih dari 25.500 unit. Lebih dari 190 gardu induk. Jumlah trafo lebih dari 345 unit. Serta jumlah pegawai lebih dari 1.700 orang yang tersebar di seluruh Sumatera guna memenuhi kebutuhan pelanggan. Mengelola penyaluran tenaga listrik tegangan tinggi secara efisien, andal, dan akrab lingkungan adalah salah satu misi kami. Untuk itu, UI P3B Sumatera memiliki tugas utama dalam pemeliharaan transmisi dan pengaturan beban sistem kelistrikan Sumatera. Kami memiliki tim yang mampu melakukan pemeliharaan dalam keadaan bertegangan untuk menjaga agar Sumatera tetap terang. Kami mengendalikan sistem kelistrikan Sumatera dengan sistem manajemen kontrol pembangkitan dari hulu ke hilir melalui jaringan transmisi yang kami kelola, serta didukung sumber daya manusia yang profesional guna menjaga kualitas pasokan tenaga listrik yang berkelanjutan. PLN UI P3B Sumatera telah mengukir prestasi, penghargaan, dan sejumlah sertifikasi bertaraf internasional, antara lain dan program-program pendukung proses bisnis, antara lain serta kontribusi kami dalam program pemberdayaan lingkungan masyarakat sekitar. PLN UI P3B Sumatera memahami akan kebutuhan listrik Anda yang terus meningkat. Kami berkomitmen menjaga pasokan listrik secara berkesinambungan demi mendukung perekonomian Sumatera yang lebih baik. UI P3B Sumatera hadir dan siap memberikan yang terbaik untuk kemajuan Indonesia.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, for the first agenda today, please welcome the representative of the host of the third Power System Sharing Series, Executive Vice President, Power Generation and Renewable Energy, Mr. Heri Nugraha, to deliver the welcoming remark.
Terima kasih, Ibu Moderator. Pak Wiloyo, mohon maaf Pak Evi Aryadi tidak bisa hadir bersama ini. Mohon izin saya mewakili. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. His Honorable Mr. Wiluyo Kuswiharto, Regional Business Director, His Honorable Professor Luis Royko, a senior member of IEEE and a distinguished member of SIGRE in Madrid, Spain. His Honorable Mr. Ronald Brutlinger from the Austrian Institute of Technology in Vienna, Austria. His Honorable Mr. Mark McGradach-Hahn, representative of Electric Power Research Institute in Dublin, Iceland. His Honorable Bapak Dispriyansah, selaku General Manager PLN Unit Indo P3B Sumatera. Board of Director of PLN subsidiaries, VPs, General all audience. Welcome to the webinar of the PLN GPST. Before we start the session, let us praise to the God Almighty for today's opportunity to run this valuable webinar. Dear Sir and Madam, the electricity business is now coming into the era of variable renewable energy, or VRE, without exception for PLN. Project of VRE has been planned, commissioned, and even run in the power system in different islands of Indonesia. The number will increase significantly soon as a part of the green commitment of PLN. Dear Sir and Madam, the intermittency characteristic of the VRE once was obvious to the power system operator, but with time, knowledge, and skill have been developed by learning from the running project to handle the VRE's variability. The GPST series webinar is another PLN commitment to face the era of VREs. Dear Sir and Madams, if we learn about the SCADA or EMS technology for VRE integration in the last webinar, today we will discuss the grid code adoption toward the VRE integration. We are so thankful for our honorable speakers from IEEE, the Austrian Institute of Technology, from Electric Power Research Institute, and also PLN. Our honorable speaker will share this knowledge, experience, and research regarding the topic. We encourage all audiences to participate actively and having a great time in the webinar. We appreciate the team from PLN Corporate University, PLN P2B, MC and moderator who prepare this meeting. Hopefully, this celebration provide benefit for all of us. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, Om Santi Santium, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heri Nugraha, for this warm welcoming speech. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, moving to the next agenda, please welcome Business Regional Director, Sumatra and Kalimantan, PTPLN, Mr. Wiluyo Kusdiharto, to deliver the opening remarks. You are kindly requested.
Thank you, Mbak Zrina. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Salam. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is our great pleasure to welcome you to PLN webinar Power System Sharing third series to discuss about the grid code adoption toward VRE, Variable Renewable Energy Integration. Currently, PLN has a strategic role to fulfill Indonesia's commitment to reduce fossil fuel power plants by increasing generating capacity from renewable energies. Most of PLN's generating capacity uses fossil fuel-based technology. As the world focus on sustainability increases, it becomes increasingly difficult to obtain financing for fossil fuel-based technologies. Increase generation capacity with a focus on new renewable energy to support the achievement of a more environmentally friendly electricity supply. We all have to be open-minded, accept the changes and commitment to PLN transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, variable renewable energy are closely related to the large-scale development of solar and wind generation that has changed the paradigm of power system and electricity markets, in which prices were traditionally based on marginal generation cost and fuel prices. Most of generation capacity was considered dispatchable and available throughout most of the year. Solar and wind don't require fuel and have practically zero marginal generation cost, although they are available only when the sun shines or the wind blows. consideration of new renewable energy electricity supply is still mixed in the balance with fossil energy, because in the new renewable energy power plants, there are intermittent or instability because the electricity supply still depends on natural condition and weather. The goal of this webinar is to discuss about how to the best plan and operate a power system with a large shares of variable renewable energy or VRE. The webinar PLN Committee traditionally invites outstanding experts from fields related to the grid code adoption toward VRE integration to present a state of the art in their research fields. We give our highest appreciation to all speakers. Mr. Luis Rocco from IEEE Madrid, Spain, Mr. Roland Brunlinger from AIT Vienna, Austria, Mr. Mark McGranahan from EPRI Dublin, Ireland, Mr. Dispriansa or Mr. Ricky from PLN UIP 3BS Sumatra Control Center, and Mr. Harry as Chief of PLN Center of Excellence. Finally, let us work together to strengthen our capacity for support the PLN transformation to realize the target of meeting renewable energy capacity. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wiluyo, for your support and wonderful opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move to the main agenda today, since COVID-19 pandemic is still spreading all around the world, unfortunately, we couldn't organize this event offline and have to do this seminar virtually. Please allow us to have the documentation by doing the virtual photo session together firstly. Please kindly open your video and give 2 thumb poses like this and your best smile today. I will count down from 10 until 1. And please keep your best pose and let us capture all the screen about 10 seconds. Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, and it's about to the end. 3, 2, 1, and thank you, and let's have a big applause. Okay, before we start the presentation session today, as a gentle reminder, please kindly visit our attendance list on the link that has been mentioned in our chat box and YouTube. The participant can also write down your question on chat box for the Q&A session. Since we have all the speaker and moderator for the session settled in our webinar room today, please allow me to introduce this young and talented man. His name is Mr. Ahmad Murdani. Good afternoon, Mr. Ahmad Murdani.
Good afternoon, Ajrina. Thank you.
He was graduated from Electrical Engineering, Universitas Sriwijaya, and pursued his master degree of Engineering Science from University of New South Wales. He was awarded some courses overseas, such as Renewable Energy Technology in Murdoch University by Australia Award Indonesia, and his other professional experience is an engineer internship in California Independent System Operator, or CAISO, and now he works in PLN as an assistant manager real-time operation planning. We are glad to invite Mr. Murdani as the moderator. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Ajrina. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Director of PLN, Board of Directors and Commissioners, Business Regional Director of Sumatra, Kalimantan, of PT PLN, Bapak Wiluyo Pusbiharto, all PLN leaders, GPST and expert speakers, and all audience in this webinar. Let me introduce myself. I am Ahmad Murdani from PT PLN UIP 2B Jawa Madura Bali as your moderator during this session. In the next 2 hours, we will have 4 remarkable speakers from PLN, IEEE Spain, AIT Austria, and EPRI Ireland. I'd like to send my gratitude to all the speakers that have joined this webinar and sincerely will deliver us the knowledge through their presentations. In this third power system sharing series, we are going to discuss about the grid code adaptation toward variable renewable energy integration. Ladies and gentlemen, this technical session consists of 4 presentations from each speaker and will be followed by Q&A sessions. All questions can be delivered directly through the chat box or platform that provided in the chat box. You can also ask the question both in Bahasa or in English. The best question will be rewarded and announced at the end of the webinar. So please don't hesitate to ask some question during the Q&A sessions after all speakers deliver their presentations. Besides, after this panel session, we're gonna have a fun quiz, of course, with some rewards to see the audience comprehension about the material. So please stay in this webinar until the end of the sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to the first speaker, let me bring you some burning questions that we would like to find the answer in these discussions. VRA integration currently become a trend. More and more countries are pushing the ability to integrate VRE in their power system, not only triggered by the environmental issues, but also VRE become more and more mature and cheaper. Undoubtedly, VRA brings numbers of issues to power system stability. How does the operator system suffer in operating the grid due to this new technology? And how can it be mitigated through grid code adaptation? We're going to find the answer soon through our expert speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker is supposed to be Bapak Dispriyansa, and unfortunately, he is unable to attend this meeting. So Pak Dispriyansa today will be replaced by Pak Ricky Faisal, Senior Manager of System Planning, PT PLN UI P3B Sumatera. I would like to greet Pak Ricky. Pak Ricky, how are you? Apa kabarnya Pak Ricky?
Halo Pak Dani, I'm fine, thank you.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Ricky sudah bergabung dan berkenan menyampaikan materi pada kesempatan kali ini. Ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly read the short biography of Pak Ricky Faisal. Bapak Ricky Faisal is Senior Manager of System Planning of PLN UI P3B Sumatera. He has received his bachelor degree in Electrical and Electronic Engineering at Institut Teknologi Bandung and his master degree in Power System Engineering at Institut Teknologi Bandung and TU Graz, Austria. He began his career at PLN in 2005 as Operation Planning Engineer of PLN P3B Sumatera and was assigned as Deputy Manager of System Planning in 2015. After 2 years in Sumatra, he moved to Kalimantan as Manager of Kalimantan Load Dispatch Center. In early 2021, he was promoted as Manager of UPT Padang. Currently, he is in charge of Power System Planning of Sumatra Power Grid. In these occasions, Bapak Ricky Faisal will present about Sumatra system readiness for VRE integration and grid code support. Okay, without any further ado, Pak Ricky, you have 20 minutes to deliver the material. Time and platform are yours.
Thank you, Pak Ahmad Murdani. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. First, I would like to say my honorable Mr. Luis Rocco, representative of IEEE Madrid, Spain, and then Mr. Roland Grundinger as representative of IET Vienna, Austria, the honorable Mr. Mark McManahan as representative of EPRI, Dublin, Ireland, and our honorable Bapak Wiluyo Pustiharto as director of Sumatra and Kalimantan region, and also board of directors of PT PLN Persero, all of the IBPs, general manager, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce my name. Myself, my name is Ricky Faisal. I'm from PLN UI P3B Sumatera. We are currently as senior manager of planning, as Pak Dani mentioned earlier. And without any further, I would like to share the presentation. Pak Dhani, is it clear my presentation? Is it?
Okay, Pak Ricky, you can slideshow your presentation. It's not fully
okay.
Show. Yeah, okay. I think you have to swipe the display, Pak. This is your presentation display. Yeah. In display setting. Display setting above there.
Sorry. Yes. So presenter.
Yes.
Is it
okay?
Okay.
Yep. Yep. You good to go?
Okay. I would like to bring this presentation about Sumatra system readiness for PRI integration and also grid code support. I'm here as a representative, or I replace Dispiansa because unfortunately he cannot make it to give this presentation. And in this presentation, I would like to give you all a glimpse of Sumatra Power Systems and also the readiness of Sumatra Power System in order to support the integrations of PRE. And also, I would like to give you the presentation about grid code that lately in 2020, we have already the new updated grid code that support for the PRI integration. This is a glimpse of Sumatra Power Systems. Okay. Right now, our peak load is around 6,144. Actually, in lately June, we have reached more than 6,300 megawatts. And Sumatra system is very, very complicated. Right now, our backbone is 275 kV as our transmission backbone from South Sulawesi until South Sumatra until North Sumatra. And currently, this is our generation mix consisting 37% of coal power plant, and then 35% of gas power plant, 16% of hydro, 9%. This is mixed. Sorry. And then around below 1% consists of oil. Meanwhile, for ownerships, PLN has around 56% of its generating capacity, and then IPPs consists of IPP in 175 kV and also 275 kV, and include IPP in 20 kV, around 35%, and the rest is REN and excess. It's less than 10%. Our transmission is very, very long from southern of Sumatra, Lampung province until Aceh province, and it's still radial, and we are still expand our transmissions and also generation based on RUPTL. We will have enough power plant, and maybe in the next year we will have 2 times 600 coal power plant. I think this is the biggest one that will operate in Sumatra Power Systems. Next, this is the comparison of historical peak load and also energy production. As we can see, in Sumatra Power System, still growth. There is still growth, although we have in 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, but it's still growth around 3.7% for its peak load, and for energy, it is higher, around 6.8%. And after now, until April, we still have until May, our production is around 17 terawatt hours. This is our daily load curve, representing the daily load curve at April 21 in 2021. As we can see from this graphic, that our load factor is still low, which is 76.3%. I think it's represent more than I think almost of the Sumatra load, typically still residential. But I think this is very potential for industrial growth. It's quite higher between the light load or peak load to the peak load itself. It's around 1,800 megawatt. The difference or the gap between peak and off-peak load. As you can see, most of the generation is from coal power plants, around 48%. This is the energy mix until April. The difference between 2020 and 2021. We can see from its percentage that still dominated by the coal power plant, more than 45%, and then gas, and then hydro, and then the geothermal. And this is what would Sumatra be like in 2030, based on RUPTL, long-term planning 2020 until 2030. As we can see, still dominated by coal, and then hydro. Hydro will take the second place, and then gas, and the rest is solar and oil. And geothermal have also a big portion in Sumatra power system. As we can see that western of Sumatra consists of many volcanoes. I think this is for the second presentation around about the PRA. I get this data from the Energy Outlook 2017 about the NRE, or new and renewable energy potential in Indonesia. For hydro, it is very the resource theoretically is very high, and still utilized around 5.4%. So it's less than 10% of hydropower plant that already operate. Meanwhile, for the geothermal, still around 5.4, and then bioenergy 5.2, and the rest is very low. There is a lot of energy potential from solar and wind in Indonesia, around 207 gigawatt peak, and for wind is 60 gigawatt peak. And this is what about the Sumatra? We can see from this map that there are a lot of potential for photovoltaic power in Sumatra Island. As we can see, it's distributed in many provinces with I think it's very good for the development of photovoltaic in Sumatra Island. Meanwhile, for the wind power potential that already record is we have potential in Aceh province, but I think it's still under study. So maybe for PRA in Sumatra, most of them is for photovoltaic type. I think this is short theoretically for PRA characteristic about variability, uncertainty, location constraint, and also non-synchronous technologies. This is the system requirements and also readiness for PRA integration in Sumatra power system. We have to conduct more and more power system studies because our system is so dynamic, because due to the progress of development of the generation, expansion, and also the transmission. And then frequency regulation implementation, both primary and secondary, and also intraday dispatch optimization in order to correct if there is many error in our planning. And then transmission network strengthening, updated grid code that facilitates PRA integration, and also SCADA upgrade to support PRA integration. The first one is power system studies. We have conduct some of the studies for the PRA integration in Sumatra systems, such as for the photovoltaic. This is one we have to done in our system. The first is load flow analysis, short circuit analysis, transient stability analysis, and then also frequency stability analysis. This is example of our power system studies that we have been conducted in Sumatra system. For example, we have proposed in West Sumatra to integrate photovoltaic in 150 kV. And this is the system stiffness of Sumatra grid. As we can see in peak hour and off-peak, it is for we have calculate using the realizations of the disturbance. For peak hour, our system stiffness is around 260 megawatt per hertz. Meanwhile, for off-peak hour, our system stiffness is around 245 megawatts per hertz. This is governor-free operation that have already conducted in Sumatra system, and we still have to implement the rest of the generator that until now we still in progress. Right now, they have already 2,574 megawatt generators that have already implemented for the pre-governor, and then the rest is around 1,237. It will be implemented in the end of the year and lately in 2022. And this is the readiness for the automatic generation control, or AGC, implementation in our systems. We have implemented the AGC in some of our generators and still on progress for other generators. This is to support the implementation of PRA in Sumatra systems. This is the intraday dispatch optimization. Right now, we have an intraday dispatch optimization if there is error more than 5% in our forecasting. So we can redispatch in real time. So the dispatch center will recalculate based on the dynamic systems. This is the grid expansion planning for the Sumatra. As we can see, we will have the blue one is this is for 500 kV that will be operate in Sumatra system. Although it's still radial and one line from South Sumatra until North Sumatra, and the rest is the second one. We also have operate 275 kV right now as our backbone of transmission system, and the rest is 150 kV, the red one, and also we have 70 kV system in Sumatra grid. We will have a lot of transmission and substation that will operate in the few next years. Until 2030, we will have many transmission and substation that will operate it. And this is for the SCADA application. We need more. We have to upgrade our SCADA and also add some features like weather forecast, and also have to implement the EMS to support the integrations of the PRA. This is our milestones for system protection, SCADA, and telecommunication in 2021 until 2025. All of this is to enhance our system and also to support the implementation of PRA in Sumatra system. What about the grid code support for the PR integration? This is the last part of my presentation. As we can see in Sumatra, in Indonesia, we have many grid code consists of Java, Madura, Bali. It is published in 2007, and then Sumatra grid code in 2008, and then Sulawesi grid code in 2015, Kalimantan grid code in 2016, and also the last is Nusa Tenggara, Maluku, and Papua, our eastern part of Indonesia in 2018. And luckily we have already published by the Minister of Energy in 2020 the grid code for all the systems. And in this new grid code, it already adapt and also give the room for the PRA integrations. I can share some of them that related to the PRA integration. This is critical support for the PR integrations. The difference between the old and the new grid code is the addition of variable operating time to the frequency range. Used to be only a frequency range for the grid code of 2008 in Sumatra. I believe that Sumatra, Java, and other systems basically adopt the same grid code, which is Java Bali grid code that we implement in each of the system. Meanwhile, in grid code 2020, we have also add some operating time to limit the operating generators. Used to be only a range of frequency. As for example, if you want to operate in 51.5 until 52, it should be operate no more than 15 minutes. It used to be there is no this kind of regulations. And the second one is this is for the voltage regulation. We remove the voltage level of 20 kV in our new grid code because it's already regulated in distribution code. And also we add voltage level of 500 kV. It is in order to enhance and also to accommodate the development of 500 kV transmission in Sumatra Island. And also we change the normal condition limit value. We also add maximum voltage criteria. For example, for 500 kV, the maximum voltage is 550 kV. Meanwhile, for 275 kV should be no more than 300 kV, and so on. And the last, this is for the THD, total harmonic distortion. Used to be in grid code 2008, only consists of normal, nominal. Sorry, I think this the wrong tables. But there is only.
Sorry, Pak Riki, 2 more minutes.
Okay. Only 1 or 2 slides more. For the old grid code, we only have total harmonic distortion, and meanwhile we add total harmonic distortion criteria to individual and total addition, and also addition of current harmonic distortion limit in Greek code 2020. And this is also our code to support the implementation of or integration of PRA. In this code, it used to be there is not available in Greek code 2008. Meanwhile, in 2020, we have add the code about intermittent PRA must be equipped with an active power regulation system that can operate in several setting modes. And also PRA intermittent generator output setting over several frequency range. And this is the last one about the frequency range setting. Used to be there is no kind of rule in Greek code 2008. We have add frequency range setting, power frequency control curve, and on PRA intermittent. And also there is exceptions of automatic PRA generator active power setting for some generators that coordinate with the dispatch center. I think that's all of my presentation, Pak Dhani. Thank you very much. If there is any questions, I would glad to discuss with all of you. Thank you so much, Pak Dhani.
Thank you very much, Pak Ricky Faisal. Such a remarkable presentation about Sumatra system readiness for VRE integrations and grid code support. Yes, we understand that it is very challenging for Sumatra power system to integrate more VRE with all the vulnerability of the system itself. Before we proceed to the next presentation, I would like to inform you that attendance link is now available in the chat box. Please feel free to fill the attendance form. And for the audience that would like to ask some questions, please put your question in the same platform with the attendance link or directly in the chat box. Please be informed that all the questions must consist to whom the question is and your identity, your name and unit in PLN. Okay, the next speaker will be Professor Luis Ruocco. I'd like to greet Professor Ruocco. Professor Ruocco, how is it going?
Hello. Can you hear me? Yeah, let me to share the...
Are you ready for the presentation, Professor?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, meanwhile, I'd like to briefly read the short biography of Professor Luis Ruocco. Professor Luis Ruocco is a professor of School of Engineering of Comillas University, Madrid, Spain. Professor Ruocco develops his research activity at Instituto de Investigación Tecnológica, IIT. Professor Ruocco is senior member of IEEE and distinguished member of SIGRE. He is member of the executive committee of the Spanish National Committee of SIGRE. He has been visiting scientist at Ontario Hydro, Toronto, Canada, MIT, Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA, and ABB Power Systems in Västerås, Sweden. Before we go to the Professor Luis Ruocco presentation, I would like to remind again that any question could be asked in platform provided and could be through chat box. Without any further ado, Professor Luis Ruocco, you have 25 minutes to deliver the material. Time and platform are yours.
Presentation?
Yep, but we only see the, what do you call it, the presentation, presenter view. Can you swipe it? Yeah, click. Yeah, exactly, click that one. And then swipe it. Swipe the presentation view. Swipe
Yeah,
your display.
you can swap screens. That
Yep.
usually works.
Okay, while we waiting for Professor Luis for the presentations, I will remind you again to feel free to fill the attendance form. We already provided in the chat box, and also if you have questions for the presenters, we're going to have Q&A sessions, and your presentation can be put and asked in the link that we provided in the chat box, or you can directly go to the chat box to put your questions. Professor Luis, are you ready? Sorry, still mute. Can you unmute your mic?
Okay, now.
Okay, you can start to share your screen, Professor Luis.
Okay, let me share screen. And
okay.
What about
Splendid.
now?
Yeah, you can start. Yeah, this
Beautiful.
is good to go.
Okay.
Okay, please, Professor Luis.
Okay, I don't know how to. It's not working. Okay, I'll go through this way. Okay, my presentation it's about the interaction requirements between between generators and the grid, and I will try to provide to you a SIGRE and IEEE perspective. I've been convener of a SIGRE working group on these issues, and also member of an IEEE task force. So I'll try to bring you the work that we have been doing over the last 10 years in this respect. Okay, this is the outline of my presentation. So I will make an introduction, and I will bring you the aims of the SIGRE and the IEEE groups. And also I will highlight the outcome of these two groups, which have been two very, very interesting reports that could be very useful for people involved in, grid access of new generation, and also developers of grid codes. Then I will highlight some of the findings that we got after the review of the grid codes, and also, we found that grid codes impose extra requirements with respect to the equipment standards, and this is very relevant. And we will make we will draw some conclusions and to make some recommendations. Okay, I must say that the activities of these groups, working groups in SIGRE and IEEE, were mainly concerned about synchronous generation. These groups, mainly the manufacturers discovered that the grid codes impose new requirements with respect to what IIC and IEEE standards require. So we must acknowledge that the grid codes are aimed at ensuring the quality and security of.
I think we have, yeah.
Okay.
Professor Luis, sorry, we were lost you. So can you also ensure that your presentation, your slide is changing, because we only see the first page of your slide.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly. Please proceed to continue.
What about the presentation? Have you been able to see changes in the slides?
Not yet. Still the first page. Still the first slide.
Okay. Yeah. Let me. What's going on? Let me just. Oh, let me.
Are you okay with that, Luis? If you're
yeah,
not okay,
let me just to try to fix the issue. Let me just to fix the issue. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, we're gonna help you to share the slides, your slide here from us, and then you just speak. Is it okay?
It could be better. It could be better.
Okay.
It could be better if you get the control of the slides. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, let me try.
Okay. Let me.
Okay, Professor Luis, can you just please stop your share screen? I'm gonna share your slide from here.
Yeah, I have. I don't know what's going on.
Admin, can you just assist us to stop the share screen from Professor Luis?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I have stopped. Can you take the control?
What about this? Can you see the slide in your screen?
Yeah, I see very well.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I'll try
go
to move the
next.
slide.
Yeah, please go to the next.
Okay, I try to move the slide for a second. Okay, working, right?
Yeah, very good. I was.
Okay, you good to go.
Okay.
What was the last slide?
Go to the second one.
Okay, this one.
No. Okay, the second one. Okay, very good.
Okay, are you good to go?
Okay, yeah, that's the slide that I was using. So I was saying that, you know, the SIGRE and the IEEE work was mainly motivated because of the discrepancy between generator standards and the requirements imposed by grid codes. But we must be aware that the grid codes have been developed by by regulatory authorities to ensure the quality and the security of the supply, but mainly in the environment that we have prospects of large integration of renewable energy sources. In addition, these grid codes have been developed mainly in power systems where the unbundling of the electric utility industry has occurred. So it is needed a framework for the relationships between the stakeholders. So, and also a very important aspect of grid code is the diversity of the requirements. You can find very different requirements worldwide. So that there is a kind of need of harmonization. Could you please go to the next slide? Okay, so the SIGRE working group was aimed at compiling the grid code requirements worldwide and to identify extra requirements imposed by grid codes with respect to the standards. And also we were interested in discussing the consistency of these extra requirements. You know, and we will see in my presentation that that some of the requirements are not really very consistent, and we wanted to elaborate recommendations on this. Could you please go to the next slide? Here you have the members of the working group. We were members from both the industry and the academia, and also we got the support of ENTSO-E. ENTSO-E is the European Network of Transmission System Operators. And I will bring, well, you know, the harmonization efforts that have been taken in Europe. Could you please go to the next slide? In the IEEE, next slide, please. Okay. The IEEE task force follow to the SIGRE working group activities, and they were also concerned about, you know, the compatibility of the standards, generator standards, and grid codes. Could you please go to the next slide? Okay, here in the SIGRE task force, we were much more members from worldwide, having not only manufacturers, but also generator owners, TSO, consultants. Could you please go to the next slide? These two reports were the outcome of the activities of both working groups. I strongly encourage those interested in developing, in using grid codes, to go to these reports, because they will be able to learn quite a lot on the connections of and the differences between grid codes requirements and the standards. Could you please go to the next? Okay, so in this presentation, we will bring a review of the grid codes, of the grid code requirements, and considering three aspects that even, I must say that two of them have been pointed out by the previous speaker. Frequency variation, ranges of frequency variation, ranges of voltage variation, but also there are two aspects that are very relevant for the stability of the system, which are the reactive power capability and the fault write-through capability. Okay, could you please go to the next slide? Okay, you know, in the SIGRE working group, we review 35 grid codes all over the world. 23 codes in Europe and 12 codes in the rest of the world. In Europe, we also review the ENSOGI grid code, you know, which has been approved as a European directive to apply in the European Union. At this point, I must stress that grid codes have legal value in the country or region where they apply. In contrast with the standards. Standards have been documents that have been developed for a further interaction between manufacturers and customers. And this is a very, very big difference between a grid code and a standard. Grid code is a document for the interaction, but the grid code has a legal value. Could you please go ahead or go to the next slide? Okay, here we bring the outcome of a review of the grid code with respect to the voltage variation. We have presented here the voltage variation requirements found in the European grid codes in the rest of the world. And the outcome of the harmonization effort in the European code, which is the ENSO-E grid code. You know, the first idea that one get from these pictures is the extreme diversity of the requirements. And you must note that, you know, Europe, continental Europe is a synchronous area, and it does not make any sense in the same synchronous area to have different frequency variation requirements. So the harmonization effort in Europe relies on that and move from the upper left figure to the lower left figure. In the rest of the world, we have a wide variety of requirements. So this is quite a challenge for the manufacturers of the equipment manufacturers. Well, in addition to frequency variation, some grid codes impose requirements with respect to the rate of change of frequency. Could you please go to the next slide? Next, please. Okay, so with respect to the voltage variation, we have the same conclusion. What we discover is a wide variety of requirements of the voltage range, of the admissible voltage ranges. So, and as you can see from the upper left to the lower left, the effects of the harmonization effort taken in Europe. Here, this is a voltage variation in the voltage and time ranges, but there are other requirements which include variation of voltage and frequency, voltage and power, frequency, voltage and frequency, which are much more complicated and much more difficult to fulfill. Could you please go to the next slide? Okay, so now we move from, from the requirements of the grid codes to compare which is the consistency of the voltage and frequency requirement with respect to what with respect to the requirements imposed by the standards. Generator standards establish, as you can more or less see on the right of the figure, there is a diagram in the plane voltage frequency, and the standards fix an admissible region. And what is really important is that grid codes impose requirements much more demanding than the standard imposed by the standards. Of course, there are solutions to with respect to the voltage ranges, which are related to the design of the step-up transformer. You know, generators are required to provide, to be able to run in certain voltage and frequency ranges. But the grid codes impose the ranges at the point of connection. So the step-up transformer plays a very important role in the ability of the generating unit to fulfill the requirements imposed by the grid codes. Could you please go to the next slide? Okay, reactive power capability. That's another requirement. Well, reactive power capability is defined by the standards at the generator terminals, whereas the grid codes impose such requirement at the point of connection. And so it is very important to be able to move the requirements at the generator terminals to the point of connection. Could you please move to the next slide? And here we did a very interesting exercise. So how the requirement imposed at the point of connection move to the generator terminals. And we discover that, you know, when the grid codes were developed, the ability of the generators to fulfill such requirements were not clearly studied. And we also discover that in some way the grid codes were imposing the application of on-load tap changing transformer. And you know, also some of the requirements resulted in an oversized generator. Please go to the next slide. Well, there is a new requirement with respect to what standards have been requesting. That's for write-through capability, the ability to remain connected to the network in case of a fault. In the previous presentation, the speaker showed how in an integrated system, there is no individual requirement to a generator. It's a system requirement. Stability is a system requirement not for the single generator, but for the system. Stability is a requirement for the system. But now these requirements have been moved to the generator. And we found that there were up to 3 different ways of formulating this for write-through capability requirement, the ability to remain connected to the network in case of a fault. Could you please go to the next slide? Okay, and here you can see what is the perspective in Europe. We had different approaches and also many different requirements. Some of them were really tough to fulfill. And ENTSO-E, the European Network of Transmission System Operators, being aware of this diversity of requirements, proposed an harmonized requirement, which is much more reasonable than some of the requirements that were imposed. Even though, can you please go to the next slide? We found that in some conditions that were not defined in the Greek code, precisely in the conditions of the extreme leading operating point, we discover that for the more demanding requirements, the synchronous machines would not be able to fulfill their requirement. So here there is a lesson, and it's before imposing a requirement, you must check if a standard equipment would be able to fulfill the requirement. Does not make any sense to impose a requirement that it is not possible to fulfill. Could you please go to the next slide?
Sorry, Professor Luis, you have 3 more minutes.
Yeah, I think that I'm concluding. Could you please go to the next slide? Okay, there is another issue that I will not go into the details, which is the short circuit ratio. So let me just to conclude. Basically, we have found that grid code requirements impose requirement not just to the machines, but also to the generating units. And well, we have found the diversity. And of course, the diversity of the power system could explain this fact. However, you know, there should be an economic trade-off between what generation and transmission can do. Because, you know, the most of the problems, most of the requirements depends on how transmission and generation behave. It is very important to take into consideration the harmonization effort that and the procedures followed in Europe. And I think that in Indonesia, you have this problem of harmonization. And the issue, if you want to make an economic power system, you should be able to use equipment standards as much as possible. And of course, the economic impact of every requirement must be assessed. And I think that I will conclude my presentation at this point.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Luis. Thank you again, Professor Luis Ruocco, such a knowledgeable presentations about generator grid interconnection requirements. I'd like to point out some numbers of important points from Professor Ruocco's presentations. Grid codes aims to ensuring the quality and security of supply power system involving large-scale integration of renewable energy resources and increased flexibility requirements for conventional generators. Grid code requirements also imposed not merely to the synchronous machine, but to the generating unit itself. Thank you again, Professor Luis Ruocco, for the presentations. We're gonna have you again in the Q&A sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to the next presentations, I would like to greet Bapak Haryanto WS that already joined us in this webinar. He is the Regional Business Director of Jawa Madura Bali. Assalamualaikum, selamat sore Pak Haryanto. Good afternoon.
Waalaikumsalam. Good morning for Mac Granagan. I am Haryanto and all the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Haryanto. Welcome to this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to inform you again that attendance link is now available in the chat box. Please fill the attendance form, and for the audience that would like to ask some questions, please put your question in the platform we provided or directly to the chat box. Please be informed that all questions must consist to whom the question is and your identity, your name and unit in PLN. Okay, our third speaker is Roland Brunlinger. I'd like to greet Roland. Roland? How are you doing, Roland?
I'm fine. How are you?
Are you ready for the presentations?
I'm ready, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Roland, for having us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to briefly read the short biography of Roland Brundtlinger. Roland Brundtlinger studied at the Technical University Graz, Austria, and the Royal Institute of Technology, KTH, in Stockholm, and received his Master of Science degree in Power Engineering in 2000. Since 2001, he has been with the Business Unit Electric Energy System at the Austrian Institute of Technology in Vienna, Austria. As senior research engineer, he is responsible for qualification testing and conformity assessment of grid-connected power converters at the ISO 17025 accredited AAT Smart EST laboratory. Roland Brundtlinger is member of national and international technical committees working on PV and their standardization, and is member of the board of their Lab EV, the Association of European Laboratories for Distributed Energy Resources. In this occasion, Roland would like to share the experience from Europe country in adapting grid code for integrating variable renewable energy. Without any further ado, Roland, you have 20 minutes to deliver your presentations. Time and platform are yours.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I would like to, first of all, greet all the fellow Technical University Graz alumni here online. And also thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to present a more detailed insight on the European situation regarding the grid codes for renewables. Let me just try to share the screen now. Okay. So you should be able to see the main slides.
Yes, Roland, you're good to go.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, in my presentation, I would like to first highlight a little bit the transition of the European energy system, of the European electricity system, with the massive integration of variable renewables, which happened in Europe over the last 10 years, and also present some of the lessons learned specifically related to the grid codes in Europe. Then I would like to specifically focus on the grid support features which are provided today from distributed renewables and why we think that they are the key to managing the power grid in the future. And then at the end, give a little bit of an outlook and a summary with a few recommendations. So jumping into the situation here we have in Europe. So I have here the subtitle from disconnected first sign of trouble to distributed energy resources governing the power system, because this is a very short description how basically the European or how the perception of variable renewables changed in Europe over, let's say, the last 20 years. So at the beginning, and I would like to also emphasize this by showing the installation installation figures for the most important variable renewables, namely solar PV and wind, over the last roughly 20 years in Europe. And you can see that at the beginning of the 2000s, there was basically no capacity installed, especially solar capacity. There had been a little bit of wind capacity installed at that time, but this was mainly in very few markets. And at that time, basically the grid codes were following, or the requirements in the grid codes were mainly following this, what we call the disconnection at the first sign of trouble, let's say, approach, where basically limits for protections were set very tightly. So basically the idea was whenever there is any kind of trouble in the system, distributed generation shall be disconnected instantaneously. But of course, at the end of the 2000s, with the increasing capacity of especially solar PV installed in distribution systems, it was clear, or it became clear, that this approach cannot be followed any longer. Because at that time, it was first actually realized in Germany that basically solar PV capacity had reached levels which were higher than the spinning reserve in the European transmission system, or the European continental transmission system. And therefore, it was clear that some things need to be changed. I also have here a figure how the generating capacity installed in Europe developed over time, but for the sake of saving some time, I would just like to summarize that at the moment, the estimation is that about 27 to 30% of the total installed generation capacity in Europe are from renewables. And yeah, so this is a significant, let's say, I have to say here, a renewable excluding hydro generation. So the most of this part of this renewable capacity are non-synchronous generator-based plants. And also you can see here on this slide that the distribution of the variable renewables is not, let's say, uniform all across Europe, but we have clearly some hotspots for solar generation, what you can see here on the left-hand side, for example, in regions in Germany, of course, that's well known, and also in some regions of Spain and Italy. And at the moment, the estimation is that solar PV and wind in Europe cover about 20% of the electricity demand in the system. So you can see that over the time, basically the role of solar PV and wind, these variable renewables have changed from basically a negligible contribution to the power system to becoming a major player in the European transmission system. And here you can just see some of the hot spots. And how has this impacted the evolution of grid codes and interconnection standards for generators in Europe? So I already mentioned at the beginning of 2000s, there was a very little capacity installed in Europe, and it was mainly wind in some specific regions. And at that time, some transmission system operators, especially in Germany, introduced first requirements for large-scale wind power to provide grid support, so to actively contribute to or to actively provide services to stabilize the grid in case of disturbances. And at that time, the first requirements also for low voltage ride-through were introduced for large-scale wind power plants. And most of these large-scale wind power plants are also based nowadays on full converter-based systems. And then at the end of the 2000s, when already about 10 gigawatt of solar PV and more than 60 gigawatt of wind were installed in the European system, the German medium voltage grid code, first of all, mandated low voltage ride-through in a number of grid support functions for all generators connected to the medium voltage systems. And then over the time, with the growing capacity of solar PV and wind, also the requirements, let's say, were growing. And a specific trigger was this so-called 50.2 Hertz issue, which was first discovered in Germany. And at that time, a major, let's say, paradigm change happened in Europe. And it was realized that in order to maintain the frequency stability in a system with a major share of non-synchronous based, variable renewable based generation, you need to have all generators, even the very small scale generators, to provide frequency support. And while at that time, basically drivers were mainly in some specific countries, in some specific markets where renewables had already played an important role. Over the following years, then basically it became clear that a European-wide solution was necessary. And Professor Rocco already highlighted the development and the contents of this European Network Code requirements for generators, which was eventually published in 2016 and is now basically the main document, the main legal, let's say, basis for the grid support functions in Europe. And this document was published in 2016, and it became eventually effective in 2019. And since then, basically these, what we call the network code RFG requirements, they have to be applied for all new generators connected to the European electricity system. And just a few facts which I would like to highlight on this European network code on requirements for generators. So it's firstly, it's important to know that this is not, let's say, to be compared with a technical standard or a technical specification. It is a legal document, so it establishes legally binding European-wide harmonization of the grid interconnection requirements. And it was developed on the basis or to ensure system security, in particular with a growing share of renewables and variable generation. So the main approach of the requirements was to follow or to define the requirements according to the system relevance of the generator. And in this context, also one of the main let's say background was to balance European-wide harmonized requirements as well as to take into account regional specifics. So there are some specific requirements and specific, let's say, parameters for the different European regions, for the continental European system, as well as for example, island systems. And the network code is formulated in a technology neutral way. So there are no specific requirements, let's say, for solar PV or for wind or for, let's say, hydro generation. So the requirements are based on a definition of so-called generator types, A, B, C, D. And these generator types are based on the installed capacity of the generator, as well as on the connection voltage level of the network. And there are general requirements which are applicable for all generators, plus additional requirements for synchronous power generating modules, for power park modules, which are basically which include all the non-synchronous generators, and specific requirements for offshore generators. And I would like to highlight this definition of the capabilities of the definition of the generator types, so that the generator types define the requirements, and they are from a systems perspective, and they are largely independent of the technology. So I already mentioned that the requirements are defined based on generator capacity, connection level, and also the transmission grid area. And now coming to the second part of my presentation, to the grid support functions. And in our work, we have, let's say, to functions, we have put here this pyramid model, which basically allows to let's say, structure the requirements. So basically on the fundamental base, the requirements in the grid codes define operational ranges for active power, for frequency, for voltage. And then based on these fundamental ranges, there are additional requirements for write-through capabilities and remain connected capabilities. So where conditions are defined where the generator is not allowed to disconnect from the system. Then, of course, the codes also include protection requirements for the interface protection requirements. And here, when you design a grid code, it's important to make sure that these interface protection requirements are also compatible with the write-through requirements. Then moving to the top of the pyramid, we have grid support functions, which today are mainly related to voltage support and frequency support. And then on the very top for, let's say, system relevant generation, there are requirements for communication and for some generators. And this is a little bit an outlook in the future. What we are going to expect is to have generators providing active grid control, inertia, and also black start capabilities. So just to highlight some of the key requirements which are currently existing in Europe. So we have already seen this defined frequency ranges, I was very happy to see that are now also included in the recent revision of the Indonesian grid code, or of the Sumatra grid code. And there's also a requirement to define capability to withstand frequency variations. So this means the generators are not allowed to disconnect due to transient changes of the frequency. And the European grid code uses the terminology ROCOV, withstand capability, to define these requirements. Then some more key requirements from the European perspective is, first of all, the frequency response. So for under frequency as well as over frequency. So there are specific requirements depending on the size of the generator and also let's say the relevance of the generator. But all the generation, basically, even the very small scale residential generation, has to provide frequency support in the over frequency range, which means that when there is an over frequency situation, frequency outside the normal operating bands, then these generators have to reduce their power feed-in. And for larger generators, there is also a requirement to actively increase power output in an under frequency condition. Then we already heard a lot of details on voltage ride-through requirements, and so I would like to quickly go over this and focus a little bit on the requirement to provide reactive current support during a fault. This means the generators have to inject an additional reactive current, which is based on, or which is proportional to the, let's say, magnitude of the voltage drop or of the voltage increase, in order to support the grid voltage during a fault. Then we already heard a little bit about reactive power capabilities. So this is also a requirement which is today in place in most European national grid codes, and it's defined in different ways. So we have a requirement in the PQ domain, and we also have a requirement that the reactive power needs to provide in a defined voltage range. And what to do with the reactive power, how to utilize these reactive power capabilities. So there are different control strategies, and one control strategy which seems to be most promising today is the Q of U. So basically a reactive power as a function of the grid voltage control to support the local grid voltage through the injection or consumption of reactive power, and of course to mitigate the effects of the feed-in on the grid voltage. There are also additional functions, especially relating to the behavior at over voltage situations in the distribution system, such as, for example, a P of U or volt-watt function, where the active power has to be limited when the grid voltage becomes very high. And this function also helps to avoid unnecessary disconnection or unnecessary trips due to overvoltage conditions. Then grid codes also define a number of requirements related to the communication to the generators, which will allow the network or the system operator to monitor the grid conditions, to immediately send active and reactive power control set points, and also to, for example, have the possibility to update characteristics of grid support functions through an interface. And this is also the requirement for the integration of these distributed generators into a future smart grid control scheme or a SCADA system on the utility side. So on the next two slides, I will not go into all the details. You can have a look at it yourself. I just have a table which presents basically the individual requirements for advanced grid support functions from distributed resources, which are currently in place in most of the Europe or in selected European countries. And you can also find on the bottom here the references to the documents. So I will not go into detail because this would take too much time right now. You can have a look at it yourself, and then also medium voltage connected generators, which are typically of type B according to the European network code. You can see that today almost all the major European markets have included requirements for advanced grid support functions. So coming to the end of my presentation, a few recommendations. So in European, we have seen a major development in the last 10 to 20 years, where the distributed energy resources, particularly solar PV and wind, have changed from a marginal technology to a visible player in the electricity market. And following this development, we've seen a number of countries updating their national grid codes and requiring distributed resources to provide active grid support function. And with the introduction of the European Network Code, RFG, in a few years ago, basically also now a European-wide legislation is in place, which enables basically the grid integration of high shares of distributed energy resources. And the focus of this document is clearly on the system frequency stability in the European-wide interconnected and synchronous area. And a few recommendations. So it's important when you develop grid codes to basically start from a systems perspective. So well, many years ago, most of the grid codes for a distributed generation were, for example, only developed with a distribution grid perspective. And this means there was very limited grid support actually allowed. And it's important because at some point or at some time a point will be reached where there will be a backfeed from the distribution system to the transmission system. And therefore, it's also important to take into account the impact of distribution connected generation on the transmission system. Then it's also important to develop grid codes from basically for all technologies, so to be as much as possible technology agnostics. And a very important point is, and that's also a lesson learned from Europe, that the requirements in the grid codes need to be there before the distributed generator is installed. So basically, when there is no point in waiting until distributed generation deployment actually takes place, because then it's already too late. And any retroactive changes to settings or to equipment will result in very difficult and very costly retrofit measures. So, for example, Germany had to learn a lot in this context, and it's important to avoid basically repeating this mistake again. And if the requirements are not appropriate, then this may lead to increased integration costs on both on the plant side as well as on the grid side. Then a reduced hosting capacity for distributed energy resources, and eventually also a compromise of stability and reliability.
Roland, you have 2 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, this is the basically the last recommendation. Latest codes in Europe and also the US can be used as a guidance for the development implementation of the local grid code. And yeah, at the end, I would just like to highlight that the work I just presented is a result of the international collaboration in the frame of the Photovoltaic Power Systems Program of the International Energy Agency. And together with my colleague, Professor Gerd Heilscher from Germany, I have the honor to chair one of their research tasks dealing with solar PV in the 100% RES power system. And yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion and the question session at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roland. Such a very fruitful presentations about grid code for integration of VRE experience in Europe. I'd like to highlight some points from Roland's presentation. Due to high share of VRE, numerous countries have been updating national grid codes and require there to provide frequency control capabilities, steady state and dynamic voltage support, write-through capabilities, and on-demand response via remote control and communication. European Network Code introduced coordinated requirements needed for safe and reliable grid integration of high share of distributed energy resources, which focus on system frequency stability in the European-wide system. Thank you again, Roland, for the presentation. We're going to have you again in the Q&A sessions, so just stay put there. Before we step to the last presentations, I would like to inform you again, please feel free to fill the attendance form. For the audience that would like to ask some question, please put your questions in the platform we provided or directly in the chat box. Please be informed that all the questions must consist to whom the question is and your identity, your name and unit in PLN. Ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker is Mr. Mark McGranahan. I'd like to greet Mr. Mark. Mr. Mark, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you very much.
Ready for the presentation, Mark?
I am, I think. Let's see.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to briefly read the short biography of Mark McGranahan. Mr. Mark McGranahan, Fellow of Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI. He provides technical and strategic input and guidance across the organizations and for the electric utility industry around the world. Working from the EPRI Europe office in Dublin, Ireland, Mark coordinates with research sector at EPRI as well as the technology innovation function. Prior to joining EPRI, Mark was vice president at Electrotech Concept and a manager at McGraw Edison Copper Power in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. Mark is going to sum up all discussion today through his presentations in the perspective of EPRI. Without any further ado, Mark, you have 5 minutes to deliver the presentations. Time and platform are yours.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to participate in these webinars. They're very well organized, and participation and the questions in chat are great. So I think the interaction is valuable for the entire industry as we go through this. And today's topic of grid codes is a very important one. I really appreciate Ricky's presentation about the grid codes that PLN has introduced already, and that provides a great background. And thank Professor Roku and Roland for giving us a background on the IEEE and CGRE work that provides a foundation for the grid codes, and summary of how they have been adopted in Europe especially. I think it's worthwhile to, we may want to in the future look at more specific examples, and Roland really emphasized the importance of taking a systems approach as we look at these grid codes. And I just put together a couple of examples from Texas. ERCOT in Texas is one of our founding system operators in the global power system transformation, and they have very high penetration of wind. And these illustrate some of the reasons that the grid codes are so important. The example on the left is from 2009, and involved an interaction between the control systems of the inverter-based resources, the wind turbine resources in Texas, with conventional generation, resulting in subsynchronous oscillations, which are normally just associated with series capacitor compensated transmission lines. So this was a new kind of subsynchronous oscillation and resulted in new grid code requirements for the performance of the control systems on the wind turbine generation. And on the right is an example of an overvoltage problem that occurred with wind generation in Texas. And it was related to the one of the requirements that Roland described, that the wind turbine requirements to provide reactive power to support the voltage during fault events to prevent the system from going unstable due to low voltage conditions during the fault, resulted in overvoltage when the fault is cleared, because we have all this reactive power being fed into the system, and that resulted in the wind turbines tripping on overvoltage, and that created more problems for the system. So that resulted in new requirements for the high voltage ride-through, and actually was implemented as low voltage ride-through requirements as well in Texas. And so the interactions that occur, one requirement in the grid codes can result in interactions that result in other requirements. And it's, this just emphasizes the importance of taking a systems approach as we look at these requirements for the individual conditions around the PLN system in Indonesia. I did want to mention, just for completeness, that the standards that are providing the basis for grid codes in the US primarily, but these are being referenced around the world as well, is the standard IEEE 1547, particularly applied to distributed resources, but up to very large resources connected to high voltage systems as well. And so this standard is one to reference and keep an eye on as this gets rolled out in states throughout the US. You can find numerous presentations in IEEE on the experiences of these standards. Very similar requirements to the ones that Roland described, so I don't want to go through the details, but communication requirements, various requirements for control functions for all types of generation. Roland mentioned that as well, kind of making the requirements technology independent. So IEEE 1547 is a very important standard. And the last thing I wanted to mention is, as we integrate more and more distributed resources, the requirements for cooperation between the distribution system and the transmission system and the markets becomes very important. And that also influences the requirements for the generation. In the US, we have a new order from our Federal Energy Regulatory Commission called Order 2222 that requires that the transmission operators set up the systems and the integration requirements for enabling all distributed resources to participate in their market structures. And we're kind of going through this right now. It's a very short time frame of only 270 days from the time the order was implemented. So both distribution and transmission companies are getting their act together to figure out how to do this implementation. And this is happening in Europe as well. There's many projects that are looking at the coordination between the TSO and the DSO and aggregators and the distributed providers to make sure that we can accomplish this integration. So it relates to grid codes because the grid codes must support the constraints and requirements of the local system distribution, as well as making sure that they support frequency stability, voltage stability, and resiliency of the overall transmission grid. And getting that balance is very important. So I wanted to mention those integration efforts that are going on, just as these are potentially topics that we could dive into in more detail in future webinars. But I thought that the discussion today was excellent, and thank again both Ricky and Professor Roku and Roland for the great background today. So I look forward to the question and answer session as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. such a remarkable presentation and insight about Texas case and how the grid could develop through the development of power system, including integrating distributed energy resources and VRE. Okay, after having 4 speakers in row, now we come to Q&A session. We have 50 minutes for the sessions. Because of time limitations, there would be unanswered questions through this webinar. So we're going to try to manage to answer the answered questions through the email after the sessions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have plenty of questions. I'd like to pick some questions from each speakers. So the first one is for Pak Ricky Faisal. Pak Ricky, are you ready, Pak Ricky, for answering the questions?
Okay.
Okay. Pak Ricky, there is a question here. Can power plants with fast response capabilities be able to, what do you call, participate perhaps with interconnected system when there is a sudden frequency change? So he asking from Fandi Setia from PLN subsidiaries, asking about the function, the participations of fast response power plants in frequency regulations. What do you think, Pak Ricky?
Of course, Pak. We will need a lot of fast response generations in order to maintain the frequency system. The system, so it is still still in the normal operation condition. I think we should have a lot of fast response in order to compensate the change in frequency due to the PRA integrations. For example, if there is any disturbance in the PRA or due to the weather conditions for the solar power plant and so on. Of course, it will enhance the system stability.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ricky, for the answer. Okay, then I go to Professor Luis, and I think these questions goes to both, for Professor Luis and Roland. The question is about European from Ade Arulian from UIW Sumatera Barat. Did Ireland, in your perspective, I think Ireland is one of the part of Europe, did the Ireland management of electric power and supply is directly done by the state-owned company or mostly by private company? So perhaps he is asking about the operation system in Europe, mostly done by the state-owned company or mostly by private company, and how are the challenges, perhaps? Professor Luis?
Yeah, let me just to share. We have in Spain a couple of archipelagos. One is Balearic Island in the Mediterranean Sea, and the other is the Canary Islands in the Atlantic Ocean. In both archipelagos, the power system is unbundling. So there is a generating company, a distribution company, and a TSO. It's true that the generation and the distribution company used to be parts of the state-owned company. But after the liberalization of the electric utility industry, that company was privatized. And now it belongs to an international group, precisely to the Italian group Enel. So in not only in the Spanish mainland, but in the islands, there is the system is not vertically integrated. One point that it's true, it's that there is no market like in the islands. There is no market like in the Spanish mainland, in the continental Europe. In the islands, the dispatch is managed by the TSO under the minimum cost scheme. So it is a combination of an evolution, I would say, of the old system to the new system. But you know, they are separated, and while the generation and the distribution company cannot exchange information, so they are from the legal point of view separated. I don't know if I have answered the question.
Okay, thank you, Luis.
Yes.
What about Roland? Roland, what do you see in Europe about the electric power system directly used by a state-owned company or private company, and how is the plus and minus?
Well, there is not much to add. So all over Europe, following the European Union directives, the electricity sector is unbundled, so that there are these separate companies, which were just mentioned by Professor Rocco. And some of these companies are in some European countries are, let's say, privately owned. Some of these companies are publicly owned. And yeah, we don't see a major, let's say, challenge related to renewables integration on this end. I would like to highlight a specific situation in some European countries, such as, for example, specifically in Germany and also in Austria, where we have a very high number of distribution system operators. So in Austria alone, it's a country of 8 million inhabitants, and we have more than 100 distribution system operators, some only serving, let's say, a small town or so, which is just a few thousand customers. And of course, it's very difficult for them because they don't have let's say, a planning department. They don't have the capabilities and the resources to install, let's say, extensive monitoring systems and so on. So this is a challenge. But on the other hand, they have a very detailed, let's say, hands-on experience with their distribution system, so which makes it sometimes more easier also than dealing with large companies. But this is it's a diverse situation in Europe, and we don't see any kind of, let's say, yeah, specific advantages or disadvantages.
Is there any like coordination? Coordinator operator for the distribution operator? Is that seeing the so diverse distribution company there in Europe? So you say that a lot of distribution company or distribution operator in Europe, and so diverse here, and it comes to a challenge. And then how then you coordinate all of the distributions there?
One thing that just happened.
Yeah, Mark, maybe.
I'll jump in, Roland. One thing that just happened actually yesterday is that in Europe, a new organization of distribution system operators for coordination of their activities was created, made up from system operator organizations from Germany and Austria and EDSO, who represented some of the big distribution system operators around Europe, all kind of combined forces to have an official entity that represents distribution systems, like ENTSO-E represents the transmission system operators in Europe. Now there's a EU DSO group that represents the distribution system operators as well, and provides that coordination so that they can talk to ENTSO-E and work out the details of transmission and distribution system coordination requirements.
So all of the distributions company here, and as well as the operators, must fulfill the grid codes, like European network grid code itself. So how far the grid code can cover for this kind of grid?
Well, the grid codes that apply to the generators, apply to
only for generators.
Yeah, and the distribution and transmission companies, have to basically enforce those and make sure that their distribution system management and their transmission system management integrate with those control systems and requirements of the generators.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Can we go to Pak Ricky Faisal? So the second questions for Pak Ricky come from Muhammad Pinandito Adi from UIP Jawa Bagian Barat. He is asking about, is there any what we call certain amount of renewable energy or VRE capacity that can be applied or integrate in PLN grid right now, especially in Sumatra? Is there any quota, something for the amount of VRE? And what about the study on impact of those VRE to the Sumatra system?
Okay, thank you, Pak Dhani. Actually, we have conducted some simulation, some study for the grid impact due to the implementation or the integration of PRA. But for the whole systems, I mean, for this, because there's only regional or part of the Sumatra system. I mean, we didn't conducted the study for all systems because it is due to the limitation. Actually, as far as I know, that PLN system planning divisions is already conducted this kind of study with the ITB, and we only make some simulation for part of them. So, but for our previous presentations, I show you that for example, for 50 megawatts photovoltaic or solar power plant in West Sumatra, is it feasible to implement it or to install in West Sumatra? That is, for example. In another systems, we have some regional, but for all systems, we didn't conduct that kind of study. And it's already conducted by the system planning division, Pak.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Ricky. Very informative for the answers. And then I go to Professor Luis and Roland again. I think the same question for both of you. Is there these questions come from Pak Dhani Barus from UIP 2B? I think this is the most important question regarding the grid code enforcement. Is there any law enforcement in Europe power system if there is certain stakeholder who violates the rules in the grid code? If so, is there are penalties in the form of financial aspect such as cutting energy and etc.? Okay, Professor Luis, what do you think about this?
Well, I can tell you how is regulated in Spain. Well, within the grid code there is no enforcement rules. Okay. However, in the law of the electricity sector, there is a number of articles, and I think that there is a chapter that identifies all the violations that can occur, and also the fines that can be issued to the entities that violate any of these rules. So precisely, these enforcement rules are not in the grid code itself, but there is pieces of legislation which include that part. So I can tell you that I sometimes write reports for the courts when a company has received a fine because of an incident, of a disturbance, whatever, and I am very familiar with that. So in the grid codes themselves, I'm not aware to have such enforcement rules, but there are pieces of legislation that include those. I don't know if Roland can extend on Austria or in Germany.
Yeah, let's say I can just also highlight the situation in Austria. So basically in Austria, all the, let's say, operators of generators, or all house owners also, they have a contract with their local with their local distribution system operator to provide basically the network. And if they operate, for example, a solar PV system, then also they stay in this contract. There is the statement that this PV system has to meet the requirements of the grid codes. So basically, if then the user of the grid, the owner of the generator, does not meet these requirements, then this would be, let's say, a breach of the contract with the network operator. And then, well, the ultimate, let's say, measure from the network operator might be to disconnect the supply to this customer.
Okay, thank you, Roland. I think there is a following question for you, Roland. Here, from Dimas Bangun Vidiansyah from headquarters of PLN. Okay, from the European lesson learned to integrate VRE in the power network, do you have any recommendation to switch the medium-sized diesel fuel power plant, like 1 megawatt, 1 to 10 megawatts, to VRE, for example, PV, since we have the desalination program in order to maximize the renewable energy share in the energy mix without raising the LCOE in the system? So this is very good questions from Dimas. So how to switch from, like we have a lot of diesel for power. Yeah, Roland.
It's a very good question, of course, but it's a little bit, I have to admit, it's a little bit beyond my expertise, and these switching, let's say, from one fuel to others, and so this is this is a highly political question also.
Why do you say like that? Why do you say it's highly political?
Because it's not just related to, let's say, technical questions, and also related to the costs. Well, it's a very difficult question. So I would not like to give a clear answer from a European perspective. In Europe, there is now let's say a European-wide policy to switch basically the electricity supply to a carbon-free, or to decarbonize the electricity generation. And but at the end, it will be the individual countries to let's say impose the measures to achieve these targets.
Okay, thank you, Roland. Okay, we go to Mark. Mark, there is a question for you from Imam Samsudin, UIP 2B. Is it possible to replace 100% power plant with VRE? Short questions, but
short question, but a long answer.
Yeah.
We actually have we actually have some good white papers that we've written, and I can share afterwards a link to that are available. And NREL also has done some white papers about what 100% renewable system would look like, and it is possible. It involves a change in the way that we control the system and manage the system to take advantage of the characteristics of inverters on energy storage devices and the generation resources themselves to perform a lot of the functions of inertia and frequency management and voltage management that we now rely on synchronous generators to help with those functions. So it involves a mindset change in terms of the way the system works, but it is possible. And when we make that migration is a question that's being studied very actively around the world right now. It's also a very important question in this global power system transformation initiative that is supporting these webinars, and you'll see work with the Australian system operator and Irish system operator and a Texas system operator that are working towards answering that question.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, for that. And then we go to Pak Ricky Faisal again. Pak Ricky, I have a questions for you from Iputu Rastaman Putra from UIW NTB. How to manage and compensate the spinning reserve from existing synchronous machine in the grid that will soon be replaced by the supply from variable renewable energy? This is very interesting question, Pak Ricky.
Thank you, Pak Dani. I will try to answer the questions. First, we have to know what kind of grid. I think is it a small grid power system, or it is a very huge power systems? Because we can compensate the PRA by traditional generation like fastest one turbine, gas turbine power system, gas turbine generators, and others. We can compensate by manage the spinning reserve regulation. That's I think the most common use in power systems. So we still have quite amount of reserves that can handle the frequency changes due to the PRA integration. But maybe the high cost, the costly solutions, we can also install some battery storage to enhance the grid stability. I think that's my question, my answer, Pak Dani.
Thank you, Pak Ricky, for the answers. And then we go to Professor Luis for the next questions.
Yes.
I think this is regarding the rate of change of frequency requirements in grid code. How to measure the required ROCOF, rate of change of frequency, that must be fulfilled by system due to VRE penetrations? This question is from one of dispatcher in PLN.
Yeah, I don't know exactly which is the point of the question. You know, measuring rate of change is not that easy, and you know, it depends on you know, how is frequency computed and how the derivative of frequency is computed. So it's easy to calculate the rate of change of frequency when you perform a simulation, but to calculate and to estimate the rate of change of frequency is not that easy. And you know, there is an issue of rate of change of frequency, and is that there are pieces of equipment of distributed generator, mainly to protect them from islanding conditions, that they use the rate of change of frequency. And this is very dangerous. We have seen in Europe, precisely in the UK, there was a disturbance in I think it was July 2019, when there was a large amount of PV distributed generation tripped by the rate of change of frequency protections, because there was a big disturbance in the system, and the frequency dropped very quickly, but the inverters thought that there was an islanding condition. Okay. So rate of change of frequency is very dangerous for that. Within the SIGRE working group, we have been working with manufacturers, and for other pieces of equipment, there is no constraint on the rate of change of frequency. The problem is that you have such kind of protection to detect a condition, so that there is a wrong application of the rate of change of frequency. Of course, as we are losing inertia, rate of change of frequency will be bigger. So, but this is very important, is to promote that the detection of islanding conditions in distributed generation and inverters-based generation is not done using a rate of change of frequency, a protection based on rate of change of frequency. But you know, in the IEEE task force report, there is a section that discusses how and which is the effect of different approaches of measuring the rate of change of frequency. I strongly recommend to get those reports that can be got from the SIGRE and IEEE websites. Okay, that's all.
Thank you. So what do you think that we should do to mitigate this kind of problems or challenge that you see that Rokov detected by the VRE and then VRE seeing as a anti-islanding? Is there any like modify the setting in the grid code for the VRE before connecting to the grid? Or you have to reset the
what I would say is that inverters must not trip with a rate of change of, it's a right-through capability base of rate of change of frequency. It means that they should avoid to use a rate of change of frequency as an approach to detect islanding conditions. There are other approaches like active methods which inject a current and then see which is the response of the system. So it is very important, and I think that the lessons learned from the disturbance in the UK in July 2018 are really illustrative and should be taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you, Professor Luis. We have, of course, we have plenty of questions here, but unfortunately, we cannot go through all the questions in these sessions because of time limitations. So we have open mic sessions. We have two questions from Eka Anise. Bapak Eka Anise, you can ask directly to the speakers. Please, you can unmute your mic. Okay. Time is yours. Yeah. Yes,
Thank
please.
you, Pak Dandi. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eka. I'm a power system engineer in the head office. I would like to ask two questions to Mr. Mark. The first question is about the short circuit transient fault event. How this VRE power plant will help during the fault event, because as far as I know, it doesn't have any inertia. And then if you want to implement the virtual inertia, it's depend on the inverter and the battery. That's the first question. And
I'm sorry, Pak Eka, to whom you asked this question?
To Mr. Mark.
Mr. Mark, okay. Okay, your second question?
And my second question is how to ensure the reliability of the protection performance. If we have more VRE in the systems, how to know that our protection performance is good, enough, or fair?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Pak Eka, will I go to Mr. Mark? You can directly answer the questions.
Yeah, those are both very good questions, and the response of variable renewable generation during fault events is one of the important topics in grid codes, and the grid codes outline different kinds of control responses that may be activated and if they're needed in different circumstances. For instance, the example from Texas that I described, where you can, most of the inverters that supply solar or wind generation have the capability to control the reactive power. So you can help control the voltage in parts of the grid that are not directly the faulted circuit. by injecting reactive power to help support the voltage. If it's an energy storage device, then you can actually control both the reactive and the real power to help control the voltage. And those inverters have the capability to respond very quickly, so they can provide a benefit during the fault event to help support the voltage. But you have to look at it from a system perspective to make sure that response doesn't cause other problems. So it becomes a system study. But at least there's a requirement that the inverters have that capability if it makes sense for the particular system where they're being installed. And then from an overall, the second question, from an overall system point of view, it becomes very important to continually evaluate the protection requirements as short circuit levels are changing and the inertia characteristics of the system are changing as we add more renewable generation, and make sure that the settings for relays are still appropriate and coordination exists where it's supposed to. So it does make continual evaluation of the protection requirements based on short circuit studies with appropriate representation of the actual resources included in those studies. So it may mean you have to do those studies more often.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark, for your excellent and remarkable answers. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to the end of this webinar. I would like to say thanks again to all the participants that actively send the questions to the speakers. Before I close the webinar, I would like to take the conclusions from what the speakers has presented. Yes, integrating VRE more and more to the power system grid is important to gain greener electricity and healthier environment. Besides, ensuring the power system stability and reliability is much more important. With all the characteristics of the VRE and its impact to the grid in planning and operation aspect, the grid code adaptations and improvement is needed, and the enforcement to all stakeholders of the grid to comply to the grid code is a must. I'd like to thank to the speakers from PLN, IEEE Spain, AIT Austria, and EPRI Ireland for informative and fruitful presentations, especially for GPST that makes this all happen, and all the audience for the very active participation. Finally, please join me to have a big applause for the remarkable speakers and for you all. Okay, thank you very much for joining this webinar. I'll pass the platform to our beautiful house, Adrina Alfionita. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you, Mr. Ricky Faisal, Mr. Louis Rucco, Mr. Roland Rulinger, Mr. Mark McGranagan, also Mr. Ahmad Murdani as the moderator for the remarkable sharing. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our last session of Third Power System series, but please stay tuned until the closing session today and don't forget to fulfill the presence list in the chat box. We will have fun quiz before the closing remarks, so please be ready. Okay, the committee, please be ready for the quiz. Okay, for all the participants, please grab your second devices. It can be your smartphone or other gadget. Then go to the link or retype the code shown on top of our screen, www.menti.com 3372160. We will start the quiz maybe in the next 3 minutes. Kindly please type your real name as your real identity to claim the prize. Since the major participants are Indonesians, please allow me to lead the quiz in Bahasa to brighten up the quiz session. Baik, izinkan saya menggunakan bahasa dalam memandu quiz agar suasana menjadi lebih semarak. Sore-sore minum teh manis, saatnya quiz. ini sudah 54 peserta bergabung. Baik, mengingatkan kembali Bapak Ibu untuk mengisi daftar presensi yang sudah dilampirkan pada chat box. Wow, sudah 84 peserta bergabung dalam kuis. Mungkin di 100 peserta kita mulai ya. Segera yang belum masuk, segera join di www.menti.com 3372160. Baik, panitia, apakah bisa kita mulai? Atau masih menunggu?
Silakan, Mbak.
Baik, kami mulai ya. Okay, the time is up, so let's get started. You ready for the first question? How much is the peak load of Sumatra in April 2021? Baik, bagi Anda yang sudah mendengarkan dengan jelas sejak awal sesi webinar ini pasti mengetahui jawabannya. Waktunya habis, kita akan segera mengetahui jawabannya. Baik, hanya 23 peserta yang benar menjawab pertanyaan pertama. Kita lihat klasemen sementara. Di posisi pertama ada Real Name, disusul oleh Montana, dan yang ketiga oleh Ibu Bilkis. Baik, kami ingatkan kembali bahwa untuk memenangkan kuis ini diharapkan dapat menjawab dengan tepat dan cepat. Mari kita lanjut ke pertanyaan kedua. Be ready for the second question. What is the biggest generation that has installed free governor facilities in Sumatra? Apakah PLT Asipan, Pangkalan Susu, Arahan, atau yang terakhir Karawasan? Baik. Waktunya habis. Wow, 71 peserta menjawab dengan benar, luar biasa. Mari kita lihat klasemen sementara. Masih Real Name di posisi pertama, namun posisi kedua dan ketiga diraih oleh QRT dan J. And the third question is, what should we do if the deviation of load more than 5%? Apakah A, running ROH intraday, B, power flow study, C, start generation, all answer is correct. Oke, jawaban yang tepat adalah yang A ya, running ROH intraday. Saya 40 peserta menjawab dengan benar. Lihat apakah ada posisi klasemen yang berubah. Baik, Real Name masih memimpin, disusul oleh Angga, dan yang ketiga oleh Banggo. Moving to the next question. Baik, dan keempat, how much is Sumatra System Stiffness Index in 2020? Oke, waktunya akan segera berakhir. Kita akan melihat jawaban yang tepat. Banyak mayoritas peserta menjawab dengan benar. Luar biasa, berarti dari awal sampai akhir menyimak ya ini. Ternyata Real Name masih memimpin di posisi pertama, disusul oleh Angga dan Dina. Pertanyaan kelima, bersiap-siap Bapak Ibu menjawab dengan cepat dan tepat. IEC and IEEE generator standards do not include requirements on A, B, atau C. Waktunya habis. Hampir 50% peserta menjawab dengan benar. Apakah Real Name masih memimpin? Ya, posisi kedua direbut oleh Montana dan yang ketiga juga JS. Ayo, siap untuk pertanyaan ke-6. Grid codes impose reactive power capability at Apakah jawaban yang A, generator terminals, B, high voltage terminal, atau C, the generation promoter can use? Oke, mayoritas peserta kira-kira 70% menjawab dengan tepat. Ayo Bapak Ibu, masih ada 4 pertanyaan lagi untuk menyusun ini real name di posisi pertama. Pertanyaan ke-7, tetap fokus. Short circuit ratio required by grid codes is, apakah yang A dari minimum required by standard, atau equal to the minimum required, atau smaller than the minimum required by standards? Oke, hampir 60% menjawab dengan benar. Maka posisi nomor 1 bisa bergeser. Ternyata belum, masih real name, kemudian School Montana dan JS. Lanjut ke 3 pertanyaan terakhir, bersiap. VCS helps fulfill. Yang A, frequency variation, yang kedua, short circuit ratio requirement, atau yang C, voltage variation requirement. Oke, hampir 80% menjawab dengan tepat. Baik, Montana harus tergeser di posisi keempat, direbut oleh JS. Pertanyaan ke-9. Should current grid codes in our country be designed for a massive deployment of distributed energy resources, although the actual installation base? Perlu atau tidak perlu? Baik, hampir 50% menjawab dengan tepat. Baik, posisi pertama tetap di real name, kemudian JS dan Dina. Pertanyaan terakhir sebagai penentu kemenangan, bersiap Bapak Ibu untuk menjawab dengan cepat dan tepat di pertanyaan terakhir ini. Which reactive power control modes are commonly used with DER? Apakah A, B, atau C? Pertanyaan terakhir Bapak Ibu. Baik, kita akan segera mengetahui pemenangnya. Real name menjadi posisi pertama. Baik, pemenang pertama adalah dengan nama real name sebanyak 8.396 poin. Mohon untuk dapat screenshot dan mengeklaim bahwa real name adalah benar-benar dirinya, karena tadi kita sudah mengingatkan ya Bapak Ibu untuk mengisi dengan nama dan identitas sebenarnya. Kemudian untuk yang kedua, JS juga untuk di screenshot untuk mengeklaim hadiah. Juga yang ketiga, QRT. Sekali lagi, selamat untuk para pemenang kuis. Dan jangan khawatir, masih ada satu kesempatan lagi untuk dapat memenangkan hadiah pada webinar siang hari ini. Okay? For other participants, don't worry because we will still have another prize for the best question. And the best question goes to Dimas Bangun F from PLN headquarters, and the second, Iputu Rastaman Putra from UIW NTB. Congratulations. Please contact our committee for the prizes via chat box. And here we now proceed to our last agenda. Please welcome Executive Vice President Power Generation and Renewable Energy, Mr. Heri Nugraha, as the host of Third Power System Sharing Host to deliver the closing remark.
Okay,
The
thank
stage
you.
is yours. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semuanya. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good afternoon to all participants. Thank you for keep staying in this webinar. As the meeting host, I would like to send the best gratitude to all honorable guests and speakers. Thank you to Mr. Wiluyo Kuswiharto, Professor Luis Rosu, Mr. Roland Brutlinger, Mr. Mark McGrenaghan, Mr. Despriansyah. Thank you for your time, knowledge, insight, and share experiences during the webinar. Thanks also to all EVPs, Director of Subsidiaries, General Managers, and all audience for your time and attention. We hope all of you get a broader knowledge about the Great Code adoption toward PRE. Thanks to our MC, Ms. Adrina Alfionita, our moderator, Mr. Ahmad Murdani, and our colleagues from PLN Corporate University and P2B who prepare the webinar. See you again in the next webinar of PLN GPST Consortium. Success to all of us. Wabillahi taufik wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, Om Santi Santi Om. Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. See you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Heri Nugraha, for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, this marks the end of the Third Power System Sharing Series. We hope that this sharing session can give us a remarkable lesson learned for the next development and implementation of grid code adaptation, especially for VRE integration. Thank you very much for your participation and attention. Have a blessed day. See you on the next Power System Sharing Series.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Terima kasih Pak Ahmad Murdani.
Terima kasih Pak Heri Nugraha semuanya.
Terima kasih Bu Azina.
Terima kasih Mas Dani.
Terima kasih
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu
Pak
semuanya.
Murdani,
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu
Jerina,
Pak
dan semua
Wiluyo,
tim
terima kasih atas dukungannya
panitia.
Pak Wiluyo. Mohon izin live.
Baik Pak.
Terima kasih tim tulis, tim pengepul pertanyaan.